I'll assume so in that case. Cool. Well, look, thanks so much for having me, and thanks, Matt, for the intro. You will notice from that I'm not a famous Christian speaker, so I'm very much going to be speaking from my lived experiences, and hopefully they'll be useful. I'll just introduce myself a bit. As Matt mentioned, I started off doing investment banking for a bit, learned a lot, great experience, moved on to do some strategy consulting with PwC, and then joined a startup called JustPark, which at the time was a driveway peer-to-peer rental business as part of the sharing economy. And we then, myself and Lucy, who I started my current business with, pivoted the business to become a parking platform. Things grew really quickly from a handful of people to 100 people or so. And really the best and the worst thing about the experience for us was the office space. And Lucy and I sat down in a kind of very bougie pub in North London and said, look, what's next? We've had a great time building a business, but we want to do something of our own now. And we kept coming back to the office and we said, look, this is a really hard experience. People spend so much money on commercial real estate and it's just geared against you at every stage. If we could fix that and we could build a team around us that would be happy to go on the journey, and what a journey it's been, which I'll go into talk about, then it would be something we'd be really excited to do. And so that's really the genesis of the business. We want to make the office leasing experience, which at the moment is just super complicated, make it really easy and wrap it all into a single price. And this is our logo, the first of which was generated for a £5 in that very pub. Now, since Jan 19 as a business, we've grown from a couple of people to now just over 50. We recently closed an $8 million funding round and, on the surface of it, feeling relatively good about that. But for me, whenever I read headlines like someone's raised money, I thought, oh, it's fine for them, but I'm finding things really, really tough. What I've plotted on here is something that approximates the emotional journey of the last few years. And you'll notice that UBS, PwC, JustPark, things were feeling pretty good. And initially at Kitt, it was very exciting. And then probably 1 or 2 months in, I suddenly had this moment of, this is harder than I ever imagined it to be. And I'm not sure whether I can carry on. And then we kind of recovered. We had a bunch of different COVID variants smash us in the face. And thankfully, over the last 9 months or so, things are really looking quite exciting. But really, it's showing from that experience that I hope will be useful. And really, I want to share the things that I wish I'd known prior to going on this topsy-turvy journey of trying to get a business off the ground. So there are 4 things that I genuinely wish someone had rattled me and told me on day 1 of the business. Firstly, build around a vision, not around you. Secondly, prioritize development, but do so carefully. Thirdly, is hire against values, not against performance. And the 4th is expand the definition of team. So kicking off, building around a vision, not around you. So really, there are 2 ways that I see of doing teams. Either you build something that approximates a dictatorship of sorts, where you as the leader have the unique and kind of exclusive access to the vision, and then you are turning it into tasks that you're telling your team to do, which is the one on the left. And the alternative is you are building a team around a vision that is greater than you, that's greater than them, and it's something that's a shared vision in common. Now, clearly, I think just by virtue of the colour of the people that I've drawn here, red versus green, it's obvious where we think we should be. But in practice, you're always straining to model number 2, and that's what we're trying to do at Kitt. And our vision at Kitt is we want to give people space to thrive in, and we are on a mission together as a team to transform what is an overwhelming and complicated journey into a simple digital experience so that people can thrive. And we want to build a team around that mission, and we want that team to completely feel like they own it. And as a side point, we give every single person on our team equity options in the business. So they genuinely are business owners in the same way that we are. Now, we really don't want to build a team in such a way where people are coming to us and saying, what do I do next, boss? It's just not a good dynamic, and it actually is very, very hard to scale. Now, the extent to which we get this right, we get greater contribution from people, we get a greater passion for the vision and the mission we're trying to do. And practically speaking, people stay longer in businesses they feel they're a part of, and actually they feel they have an ownership over. And I think scripture shows us that leaders of the church, in particularly in the letters of the New Testament, are encouraging others to pursue a vision that is greater than themselves. And I think as a founder or as a leader, the thing that I had a challenge to get my head around is we actually do have a unique role to communicate the vision. And rather than thinking, oh, we should just be this kind of distant, faceless kind of supporting act only, it is important that you lead strongly with communication whilst giving people freedom to pursue it on their own. And a good example of this, of how I think it can work really well, a friend of mine is a fantastic visionary, and he spent some time with some of the people that he's building something with. And they check in every 3 months or so. And really the brief is they want to remind each other of why they're there. And at the end of it, someone came up to me and said, it feels so good. I finally feel like I've been plugged back into the mains. And really it's your job as a leader to plug your team back into the mains of the vision. And you don't do it once and it's done. You have to do it again and again and again. So I'd say, do not build a team around you, but you do have a unique role as a leader to point people back to that vision time and time and time again. And practically speaking, for us at Kitt, we get together on a Friday to kind of celebrate the week and talk through everything that's happened. And it's kind of a foam finger pumping moment of thanks so much for this and here's something we released and so on and so forth. It's my job to constantly try to contextualize everything we're doing in the bigger picture. We're not just releasing a tech product that day that's gone really well. We are releasing something that builds us closer towards the vision of giving space for people to thrive in. So in summary, I think our role is to point people beyond themselves, and you have to keep doing that. And if you do it right, you'll get a team that is in. The next one is around development, and specifically around people development. And in our experience over the last couple of businesses, it's been that there are quickly 3 types of teams that seem to emerge. Team number 1 is you've got a competent leader with a team of individuals who are implementing with them. Team number 2 is you've got a bit of a leadership gap and you tend to fill that gap. And then you've got implementers of 2 or 3 who are working with you on that. And then team number 3 is you've got a potential leader. So somewhere in between the two. So someone who has the potential to grow into the leadership role, provided you focus on giving them the tools and the encouragement and the challenges that they'll need in order to do so. Now, clearly the vision is to get every single team in position number 1. But when you're 10, 20, 30 people, the reality is it's pretty hard to have leaders in every position. So you're kind of constantly going on a journey to get everyone into the right place. And as you grow, the anticipation is that you will have amazing leaders leading effectively, and you become the leader of those leaders. But it is a journey. I've made a number of mistakes on this one, but a couple that I think are really pertinent is, firstly, assuming that everyone wants to be a leader, I think is a big mistake. And I've got a really good example of this. Let's call this person Ben. I would meet with Ben once every 2 weeks to check in, and Ben was working in the marketing team. And my encouragement to him was that, Ben, I really think you should be pushing yourself. I think you're doing really well at generating fantastic content, but what about leadership? Isn't that something you want to do? Let's talk about how you can get there, and so on and so forth. And every time we met, the conversation was less and less well received, and the energy levels were dropping and dropping and dropping. And on the 4th meeting, he turned to me and said, Steve, I don't want to be a leader. I just want to make amazing content. And it was quite a shell-shock moment for me, because I'd been imagining him somewhat in my image and imagining that he would want what I would want, and that everyone has to be a leader and so on and so forth. In the end, he makes fantastic content and will continue to do so, but isn't someone who wants to be running a team of 50 or 100 or whatever it ends up being. And so what I've been doing is trying to force him into a role that he didn't want to do. And actually he individually was going to thrive as someone who was executing with his creative gifts. The other side of that is, by trying to make every single person a leader, you end up diluting your time, and you have very, very little time when you're trying to get something off the ground. And so we then moved to a bit of a mantra of, let's identify potential leaders, and you can only probably have 1 or 2 that you're investing in any given time, and just go all in on those 1 or 2 people. And I think the way we've tried to think about it is, or the development model we have is about the entire person. It's not about just their outputs and their inputs and their tools and so on and so forth. I think your heart really needs to be in it so that you are developing them holistically. So it's not just about what they can do for you, but it's about them knowing that you care about them. And everyone knows the difference between a leader who wants something from you versus a leader who's going to give you something. And another person I think who we've done this quite well with is, let's call her Jane. Jane came into our team when we were about 10 people and we needed some admin support for 3 weeks. So Jane came in as a temp. And week 2, Jane took me to one side and we've been getting on pretty well with her. And she said, Steve, I've just been noticing every time you come into the office and you're a bit stressed in the morning, it affects the entire mood of the room. And I've also noticed this, and I've noticed this, but I think you're doing these things well. And I came away quite shell-shocked. I was like, firstly, you're after a week, you've bowled up to me and told me some of my flaws, which is helpful, but quite bold. Secondly, I oddly feel very drawn to what you're saying, and I kind of buy into it. And I feel like you're on my side. So in a way, I was like throwing it back to her, Jane, why are you here? Why are you here on a temporary basis? Like, tell me about your story. And it emerged that Jane had kind of a lack of confidence to commit to a certain career path because she felt as though she wouldn't be able to nail something specific. So she'd been a generalist for a number of years. I said, Jane, the way that you talked to me and the way that you gave me truths I didn't want to hear, that makes you feel like you could be an amazing consultative salesperson, delivering hard, compelling messages and making me want to see you the next time. And after a long journey of kind of talking to her about that, and I think kind of pitching her right and speaking to some of those kind of fears that she had personally, it transpired that she ended up becoming a salesperson, is now comfortably our top performing salesperson in the business, having never done it before. And really, that's one of the most heartwarming stories. And I would now count her as very much a friend. And I think our role as a Christian is to try to raise people up like Jane and get it right in those examples. But ultimately, to dive into things beyond just what you see on the surface and to care for her or them as people, not as a means to an end. And that we have this unique position in that we understand people to be made in God's image. And so we, with his help, can see who they are made to be and can encourage them towards that. So I think our job is to raise people up, care about the whole person, and they will know the difference if you do so. But do not spread yourself so thin that you actually don't have the time to do it. So the next one is hiring against values, not against performance. And I just want to be clear with what I mean by values. Excuse me. At Kitt, we have 4 values and we are trying to build our culture and everything we do around it. The first is be each other's toolkit, which is a fun play on words. And really the message there is we are one team, we are one family, we're in it together. The second is think outside the floor plan. And for us, that's never accept the status quo. We're doing something that's not been done before, so don't assume the way things are is the way they should be. The third is clear the fog. And our job is to oversimplify as much as possible. We don't want to provide complexity, we want to provide simple solutions. And the final one is always bring your gaffer tape. So no task is too small or beneath anybody. We are willing to do anything to make it work. So for us, those values are things that we've now been able to define. And I think when we then look at that as mapped against performance, we found that there are 4 types of people when it comes to your organization. In the bottom left, you've got those that have values that don't align, so bad values is how we'd call it, and low performance. And it's quite obvious if you've got someone who's not performing and you've got someone who doesn't have an alignment of values, it's not someone who's going to work out in your organization. The next one is the one on the bottom right, which is people who've got great values that align with yours but don't have great performance. Those are people that can be developed into top performers, and we've seen that time and time and time again. But you have to focus on the values because you're building investing for the long run. Then you have the top right, which is high performance, great value alignment. There's, again, no question, those are your superstars. You want to keep them and empower them to lead. And then the top left is actually the most dangerous hire you'll ever make. And they are people who are very, very high performing, but have very bad values alignment. And what we've tended to find is that not only are those guys, how do I put it? Not only those guys not align hugely with you when you're trying to lead, but also they can cause havoc, particularly with those on the bottom right. So those who have not great performance right now, but do have great values, can be led astray by those who are performing really well, but don't align with the way in which you want to build your organization. And I put a skull and crossbones, which is perhaps too strong. But I can think of a few examples where, let's say a salesperson who's like smashing their targets, but is doing so in a way that is not being each other's toolkits. So they're selfishly pursuing their goals and they're throwing other people under the bus to get there. It's very, very, very tempting to keep them because they're delivering great work, but it will eat your organization from the inside out, and it will encourage those that are kind of impressionable and developing to act in the same way in order to perform. So what we've said is values really, really matter. We absolutely need to make sure we know them, and we have to ruthlessly hire and sometimes fire against those values. Protecting the culture you've got is absolutely everything. And if you don't have a huge bar for your values, then inevitably they end up getting diluted over the course of time. So ruthlessly hiring against your values, and really off the back of that, you are trading off short-term gain for long-term gain. And the final one, which is probably the most unexpected, and kind of going back to that emotion-ometer at the top, was the thing that I had the least expectation of. It's around expanding the definition of team. And the principle at play here is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But I'll set this one up in the way that we understood it. The stats on startups are startling. 90% of them go on to fail within the first 10 years. And we met with one of our investors in JustPark just before we started Kitt, and we said, look, we want your advice. How do we make sure we go the distance? How do we make sure it's going to work? And he said to us, Steve, Lucy, do you know why most startups fail? Why do 90% of them fail? And we said to him, okay, I know. It must be because they've got the wrong product. He was like, no. We're like, okay, well, surely cash runs out. That's always a factor. No, it's not that. Is it disharmony within the team, founders falling out? No, that's not the reason. Is it a pivot that's gone wrong? No, it's not that. Is it market timing? Is it competition? No. The number one reason startups fail is because founders give up. And we were like, what do you mean founders give up? He said, well, they decide that they can't do it anymore. We're like, well, what do you mean you can't do it anymore? And in the end, we went away and kind of thought that was surprising, but I still don't really understand it. And then 3 weeks into the business, I can tell you, I had a very deep understanding of what he meant. In practice, when you are working within a business and things are kind of working to an extent, you have confidence that you're adding value. You know that if you turn up on a bad day, others are going to push the business forward. And also, you know that the product you're offering is actually good and you're getting paid. Now, when you go into a startup, many, if not all of those things aren't true. If you don't turn up that day, nothing happens in the business and you've got less money in your account and you're still not getting paid and you don't know if you're actually any good at it. And I remember walking to work every single day being like, man, why do I want to give up so hard? He was so right, but why is it happening to me? Is that evidence that we haven't done things right, or I've made this enormous mistake, and so on and so forth? And I think sitting down with some people who I know and love, and hopefully they know and love me too, they said, look, you don't be disheartened by finding this really, really tough. Starting something new is really tough, and don't see it as evidence of failure. But you do have to expect that you're going to feel this way, and you have to plan around it. And I thought it was really interesting. And actually, it turns what can be quite scary into something that's incredibly positive. Because if you can overcome this major risk of wanting to give up, then your ability to pursue your vision and realize it is, I mean, not inevitable, but surely you've got rid of 90% of the risk. So we said, actually, if we plan around this and nail this, then it's going to work. And so what we decided to do, both individually, myself and Lucy, is we wanted to build support networks around us with people who aren't on the payroll, which is why we thought about expanding the definition of team. For me personally, I've got two things that I do to make sure that when I want to give up, people tell me not to. The first is I've got a weekly call with some of my best friends, and we're reading at any one point a Christian book of some description. We then praying together, encouraging one another, and making fun of each other, as you can imagine, for 45 minutes on a Tuesday morning. And that keeps me plugged into the bigger vision and feels like maybe I can get through this week when you're having a tough time. The other, which was super unexpected, and I would really, really highly recommend this, is finding another Christian who's at a similar stage with what you're doing, so you can encourage one another. Someone, we'll call him Frank for argument's sake, who I vaguely knew at a previous church, and we got in touch randomly as he started a business 9 months before I started mine. And we met up, and after the pleasantries, I said to him, Frank, how are you actually finding it? And he was saying, well, I haven't wanted to give up this week so far, so things are getting better. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, I finally found someone who understands what I'm going through. And really what I wanted to know from him is does it get better? Am I going to be okay? And he wanted to know the same from me. And in the end, you have this kind of strength in the same struggle together. And again, praying with someone like that has a whole new meaning and a whole new set of value to both of you. And so for us, this principle was the main challenge for early stage that we could see is wanting to give up. Starting something is super tough. You're doing something that's not been done before in many cases. And so as a result, you have to combat it by expecting and planning around it. Have your go-to people ready, brief them on exactly what kind of thoughts you're going to be having that week, and be real with them as to how you're feeling and the challenges you're actually facing. And again, if we can reframe what is currently a big challenge into actually something that's quite empowering, if you can do this well, then your ability to pursue your vision and make it real is massively de-risked. So coming into land, we firstly feel that your role as a leader is to point people beyond themselves, and you'll need to keep doing that. And if you do it right, you'll get a team that's in. The next is raising people up and caring about the whole person, and people know when you care about them versus caring for what they can do for you. Values matter, know them and ruthlessly hire around them. Short-term gain versus long-term gain, there's no comparison. And finally, plan around wanting to give up. It is incredibly tough to get something off the ground, but have your go-to people ready and just be real with the challenges that you're facing each day. Those are the things that I was desperate. I really wish I'd been told from day one, and hopefully they are useful for some of you guys. And that's me landed and in the waiting area.
You've landed and are in the waiting area. That's so good, Steve. Thank you so much for all these practical insights and hard-won lessons. You know, you've really lived this stuff and experienced it. So thank you for sharing your time and your insights. Tell us what does the landscape look like for Kitt over this next year, 2022? What's your sort of focus areas, your growth areas?
So we're hiring a lot in London. So the aim is to probably double or triple the size of the team this year, and then we'll be launching our first international market, likely across the pond, but we'll be deciding that in the next few weeks. So it's going to be a wild ride.
It's really good. And there maybe a couple of questions from people in the chat. Feel free to post while we've got Steve for the next minute or two. Christina's thank you says really helpful, Steve. Thank you. I wondered, in terms of, there are growth in organizations. It's not linear, is it? It's sort of more staircase, and you hit these growth barriers. Are you expecting a sort of growth barrier that you're having to navigate around as you talked about hiring, doubling or tripling the size of the team? Are you expecting to navigate around some growth barriers, and how are you going to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, it's happening often enough that I believe it's inevitable now, and it will keep happening. I think we actually pivoted our sales model only 4 months ago, which is why things are growing quite quickly as a result now. And so we came up against a barrier. We want to grow faster, but we can't right now, and therefore we have to rethink how we sell. And so that's something that we've probably done 3 or 4 times as we've got to the next stage. Really, the challenge for us now is a lot of what I've said I need to make sure actually happens, because going from a team of 50 to a team of 150 doesn't happen on its own. And I think already we're finding, okay, we've now got a management layer coming in. How do you empower leaders, and how do you not lose your values whilst acknowledging that you have to scale up the organization to lead through others? All of this stuff, which I'm sure we're getting a lot wrong, but we're doing our best to get it right.
It's brilliant stuff, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing your time, and especially on a Saturday as well. You've got family commitments and all the rest. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and that you get some downtime as well. And God bless you, Steve. Thank you again.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Lynn.
Steve Coulson, everyone's fabulous.